Thank you. As Rebecca said, my name is Andrew Havens. I am a senior here at Cornell, going for a degree in, of course, politics. That was the only thing that made sense for me. I was the Tomlinson Fellow in Representative Government, and I spent 3 months this summer working in the D.C. office of Congressman David Loebsack of Iowa's 2nd District, the only Democrat representing Iowa in the U.S. Congress in any branch of it. So that was really the only place I applied to. Congressman Loebsack has a long history at Cornell. Before being elected to Congress, he was a politics professor. He is now the professor emeritus, I believe, at Cornell. So that was one of the ins I kind of had with him. Right here, of course, you see myself with Congressman Loebsack with the best $15 haircut the U.S. House barber can give you. That's one of the great things about the House is you never know. The first day I got there, I'm like, I'm sorry, we have a Baskin Robbins in our job. This is awesome. This is where tax money should be going to, is building this kind of stuff. So yes, we have our own barber, we have our own post office, our own supply store, our own gift shop, our own bank, travel agency, anything you can imagine, U.S. Congress probably has it somewhere. So that was taken there. Congressman David Loebsack was elected in the Democratic wave of the 2006 midterms. This was, of course, 2 years before President Obama got elected. The Iraq War was, of course, very unpopular, and so a lot of Democrats had a good year. He spent a lot of time working for internet access for rural Iowan families. That's an issue very near and dear to his heart, due to the fact that since he believes that really everyone deserves access to the internet and really needs it to survive nowadays, he hates the fact that people in the more rural areas don't have that kind of access because nobody thought to really build stuff out there because there isn't really a point because nobody lives out there really. Like I said, he was a former politics professor at Cornell. Here is a photo of where I work. This is the Longworth House office building. It is one of 3 buildings that is designed to house all 435 members of the U.S. House. Each building is named after a former Speaker of the House of either fame or infamy. This one was named after Nicholas Longworth of Ohio, who served from 1925 to 1931. My duties were responding to constituents. Every day we would get in letters from people in Iowa or really from all across the country asking us about certain things. Some of these things were about pretty basic issues, gun control, illegal immigration, right to abortions, things like that. But sometimes we would get like really obscure letters. And I don't mean obscure like they're strange, it's just something we don't normally see. So some letters about on how red light safety cameras are a scam and we should take them all out, or how cell phones give you cancer. And so we, of course, didn't have standard letters already written out for things like that. So my job was to go through and basically write as the congressman, how would I believe that the congressman would respond to this. And so that was one of the more interesting parts. And then my letters would be basically go through the editing process with the rest of the staff before they're sent out to the people. Managing the phone lines took up the most of my time. This was, of course, people call in a lot in congressional offices. They're not always nice, but that's the thing in politics. You have to learn how to have a tough skin about this kind of thing. You're often called not nice things. In one sentence, I was called a communist, a socialist, and a godless heathen, which was interesting. So this, though, really gave me my biggest exposure to the people of Iowa, because you have people, I mean, from all walks of life. You have people calling you about everything from food stamps to veterans health care to farming subsidies to one of the big things was the Dakota Access Pipeline. Of course, people more in favor of it being sent to us. That was annoying. But my favorite part of this job was giving tours of the U.S. Capitol to D.C. visitors. Whenever people from our district or really from anywhere came into our office, we would send out interns like me to go give them tours of the Capitol. This was my favorite thing because I've spent the past, now it's 16 years learning everything I can about American politics and American history, and now I felt I could finally do something like actually stable with that. And so I did things differently than some of the interns. They would focus on things like, when did this window get installed, or like when did they install this wing of the Capitol? And that's fine, that's important, but that's not really, to me, that's not the Capitol. The Capitol is, we have had some of the most outstanding individuals in American history walk through these buildings with some of the most interesting personalities. And to me, they are really what makes up the Capitol. These are the people who have argued everything from abolition of slavery to westward expansion. That's the important stuff. So this was always my favorite. And also just all the art we had there. We had this giant statue, the Statue of Freedom, a bronze model. The gold model sits currently on top of the Capitol. Now, I would always say this statue was 19.5 feet tall, meaning it was only a few inches shorter than the federal budget every year. So I always tried to add in a number of jokes to, help people understand. That's the thing I learned, is you needed to make it simple to understand. My most awkward tour was probably a family came in, and there was only one of them spoke English. It was a son from China. He and his parents were visiting him when he was at college here, and he was the only one who could speak any English. And so I had to simplify what I was saying enough so that he would be able to translate and his parents would be able to understand. I didn't realize at that time that we had Chinese tour guide books that I probably could have given them at, hindsight, yes, that probably would have been easier, but oh well. But you also attend events for congressional staff. These are like hearings or briefings that congressional staff members just might not be able to attend. They have a lot of work to do. And so they send interns like me to, see what they have to say and then write up a report about it. That was interesting. And my special projects were, since I loved giving tours so much and I had gotten so many good reviews from constituents about my tour guide method, they asked me to actually write a manual for interns in the future in this office. It turned out to be 28 pages long, which I don't think is something that they expected, and I kind of feel bad for the other interns now. But another thing was, I of course had to do a special project, as do all Cornell fellows, at our sites. Mine had to be a reflection paper, basically a policy proposal on something that I cared about. But what I wanted to do was write a piece of legislation. I have always been fascinated by what's called the Congressional Gold Medal. That is the highest honor that members of Congress can award an individual. It is literally a gold medal that is minted with the person's face on it and then like a little inscription in the back. It's not given out very often because it does have to go through Congress, but it's been given to people like Walt Disney, John Wayne, Ronald and Nancy Reagan, so a lot of really great people. So I decided, okay, we're from Iowa. Who from Iowa deserves the Congressional Gold Medal? The first name that came to my mind was Dr. Norman Borlaug, the famed agricultural scientist with the Green Revolution. Unfortunately, he had already gotten it, so I had to go to someone else. So I went to Grant Wood, Iowa's greatest artist, the painter, of course, of American Gothic, one of the most iconic images in American pop culture. And so I wrote a piece of legislation detailing why I felt Grant Wood deserved the Congressional Gold Medal. I then sent that out again to the rest of the staff to, have any edits, things that they didn't think made sense. And like I said, I also had to write a policy proposal. This meant that I had to find an issue that I cared about. Seeing as we're from Iowa and farming is probably our biggest industry, I decided to go with genetically modified crops. With the one I paid specific attention to was Bt-infused corn. Bt is a chemical that is found in the digestive system of some insects, but when eaten by other insects, it can be very deadly. So scientists are now infusing this chemical into corn so that when basically insects that eat away at the corn eat it, they die because of the Bt now infused in the corn. And so I was saying on how we should have more of that. Basically, again, it went through an editing process to the Congressman. Here were some of the great experiences I had while I was in DC. I was one of only a few interns who was lucky enough to hear a lecture from House Speaker Paul Ryan, non-political, just basically talking about what he wished he had known when he was our age. And some people asked him, what's the best thing about being speaker? What's the worst? He said the worst was when the security told him it was time to move on to the next event. He said, worst, you don't really have control over your day anymore. I got to see 1996 Republican nominee and 76 vice presidential nominee, Bob Dole, at a pet adoption event that's been a major cause of his. So I've always had a great deal of respect for Senator Dole. I've always thought he was one of our better nominees who lost. So that was really a really great experience. I got to meet David Copperfield, the most famous magician in the world. He was doing a hearing about why magic should be declared a national art form. He was a special guest, and I kind of wish he had just appeared out of thin air, but you're in the US Capitol, and that creates all kinds of security issues with smoke and hearing explosions. I probably wouldn't like that, but that was really cool. And then the coolest thing was probably I was giving a tour one day to a group from Australia, and I was bringing them through the Capitol Rotunda, which is where they lie people in state, and this is where a lot of the big stuff happens. And we were told to move to the side by the Capitol Police. I'm like, okay. You guys haven't told me where to go before, but okay. And then the Dalai Lama came walking through the door with his entourage, Secret Service, his own private security, other monks. And that's really the best photo I could get, unfortunately. I had to spend about 3 minutes explaining to my tour group that this was not something you normally see, because they thought I had kind of planned this out for them at this exact moment when I had to tell them I had no idea this would happen. So what I learned more about the issues facing Iowans on a daily basis. Being from Illinois and a suburb of Chicago, the issues facing Iowans are not the issues facing the people where I live. The people in my congressman's office back home, where I've interned for 2 summers, deal mainly more with highways, road traffic, that more industrial city kind of things. This dealt more with farming, veterans health care, Medicare, the really important things. So this was a great learning opportunity for that. I also learned what it takes to make a congressional office function. You had about 5 or 6 people each dealing with different issues who all had to coordinate to make sure that the congressman stayed on message, that everything went smoothly, and that nothing could be used to hurt us. The other thing was how members of Congress interact with each other. Now, it's one of my favorite quotes from Harry S. Truman is always, if you want a friend in Washington, get a dog. That is not true at all. It's always the assumption that members of the opposite party do not like each other. That I have not found to be true. We had all kinds of bipartisan events that helped build those relations between members of different parties for causes that really everyone could get behind. We had the pet adoption thing. I mean, you can't really be against pet adoption, and we had zoos from all over the country bring in zoo animals to showcase the 100th anniversary of the National Park Service. So I got to be right next to a penguin, which was really cool. And then they also had the yearly congressional baseball game where each party builds a team and they basically play against each other. I also learned how to live in a bustling city like DC. Of course, this was my first time living alone in a major city, and so I had to get around on my own. And I learned never take the Metro on the day there's a Nationals game, because that will not be fun. And where I'll go from here is this solidified my interest to pursue a career in a congressional office and work to improve the lives of Iowans and Americans after I leave school. And this convinced me that I do eventually want to run for office at the local, state, or national level. So I just want to say thank you to the Cornell Fellows Program, my site sponsor, Will Collier, who unfortunately could not make it today, my faculty sponsor, Hans Hassel, and my faculty advisor, David Yamanishi. Thank you.